All right. Good morning, everybody. And today we are going to go ahead and wrap up the purchases menu. So today we're going to be talking specifically about these reports that we see here today. Um, just like the sales reports before, you may see some reports on your list that you may not see here. We are going to go ahead and skip some reports that we know might be more client specific. So if you have any questions about those reports, please let us know, email us, or send us uh, a question in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just go ahead and get started. All right. So first things first, the buyer purchasing report. So this report is basically it's a buyer report that includes sales information for the foreseeable future, so buyers can know what they need to buy for certain demand. So very similar to an inventory reorder list, but the information and the calculations may be a little bit different. Um, the buyers, the filter options, the buyers is looking at the buyer that is tied to the inventory item. So not to be confused with the buyer that might be assigned to the purchase order. These are buyers that are set up under the inventory item master miscellaneous tab. So that is the filter option for buyers. Same thing with priority one vendors, which we've gone through a little bit as well. These priority one vendors are vendors that are assigned as priority vendors for the item itself under the inventory item master vendors tab. And then, of course, you can go ahead and just select specific items that you want to look at as well. So all of these will work in tandem with each other. So if an inventory item is selected, but it doesn't match the buyer that's selected, then it will not show. So after you've selected your filter options, you can go ahead and specify open sales up to a certain point. So there's an open sales calculation, open purchase orders up to that point as well. So there's a open orders total as well. Um, and then we get into grouping. If you want to group by buyer, order options. If you want to order by the item code or by the priority, of course that's just how you want to see it. And then we have these different layouts. So the different layouts more control the sales information, basically how many months or what totals we're looking at in the future. So this initial one, just to show you, of course, we see all of our items with on-hand quantity, depending on your filter options, of course. It shows us our on-hand, shows us those open sales up to that date that you selected, open POs up to the date you selected, um, received amounts, last cost, and current market cost. And then, of course, it shows you the sales option. So this layout one is showing you monthly sales, and it's starting from this month and moving backwards. So you can see with this test system we're working on, pretty much all of my sales happened within this month. And then we have lost sales on the other side, and it shows you what month we show up to 3 months of lost sales. Lost sales is pretty much just shortages. So whenever we sold in the month of, or whenever we sold this Eddie smoked turkey drumsticks, we had a shortage of 115 cases or 115 pounds, I believe. But anyway, that is pretty much it. And all of these, of course, are calculated in the master unit of measure. So bear that in mind as well. All right. So that's one layout. And you'll see if I select a different layout, it's really just changing those monthly calculations. So now we're not even doing monthly, we're doing up to 13 weeks. So I can select my weeks that I'm looking at for my sales and click preview. And so here it's just showing me up to 13 weeks and any lost sales within those weeks, but none of these calculations change. It's literally just changing this area of the report. And then, of course, layout 3 basically just allows you to select only up to 10 weeks. As you can see, though, depending on the layout that you select, that Excel feature, some of these features may be taken away. So we cannot export layout 3. We can't print or preview layout 4. So layout 4 is strictly for an Excel export. And that also includes another area, which is weekly average sales. So we can calculate average sales based on the date range. And then layout 5 is purely average sales for those weeks. So depending on how you run it, that is essentially what this report is. Um, Changing the layout only changes that sales figure area, but it'll pretty much give you the same calculations. So that is the buyer purchasing report. Now moving on, we'll go ahead and come to the common denominator receiver report. Um, Essentially, this is a lot like the receiver report that we're going to get to later on, but it's very, very basic as far as its setup. We're not getting into the nitty gritty. We're not giving you options to select certain POs or anything like that. We are setting a date range, and these are the received dates for those items. You can choose to select by item code type or category, and that is affecting the select button. So the select button brings up your item list. And then you can look up by an alternate unit of measure as well. So if it's going to run by the master unit, of course, by default. But if I wanted to see all of my items that might have been received in eaches as well, I'll go ahead and backdate this as needed. Click preview. And here I can see, okay, here are my items that were received during that time period. Here's total master unit, and then here is any items that had that each unit of measure, how many eaches were received as well. So that's basically it. So very, very straightforward report. Cost details of POs and load ID. So this is very nice, much like that cost details screen that we've shown in a couple of screens, like the add-on PO and the purchase order screens. You can look at the cost detail for your line items. So the first thing you'll do is select, am I looking up by inventory POs or load ID? When you've selected that, you'll go ahead and select the purchase order or the purchase orders that you want to look at. So I'm going to go ahead and select 2 of them. Of course, holding down control, you can look up whatever you need or select as many as you need. I'll go ahead and click OK. And when I click refresh, it's going to show me the original purchase order, and the line number for that item. So all of these are based on line items. So you'll see multiple lines for the same purchase order more often than not. So here I've got same purchase order, 2 different line items, my cilantro. This shows me my inventory cost. Let me go and expand this. This shows me my inventory cost. And then right below it, I will see any affiliated add-ons with that. Show me the vendor name, the cost type, and the estimated cost, and everything like that. So that is essentially what this report shows, is any cost feeding into a line item. And then from there, of course, you can Excel and preview. And since this is a grid screen setup, it's going to basically be what you see is what you get when you preview or export. And then, of course, you have your totals down here as well based on what you are reporting. All right, so nice report to show basically all of the details feeding into the value of the received item. Inventory reorder list we have talked about a couple of times before, so I'm not going to go into great detail. We did talk about this under the sales reports training. Essentially, this is what you are going to print out when you need to know what you need. So very straightforward. You can go ahead and print only for short items. So this is based on your demand. You can just print out all items to see exactly what's going on. So basically, just despite whether it's a short item or a short quantity or overage or whatever, we're just going to throw everything in there. And then, of course, by that I mean that's just the calculation or what's showing based on the short quantities. You can always filter this by certain inventory items, by priority vendor, by buyer. So a lot of the same information that we've been seeing as far as filtering. And then, of course, you can filter for certain customers depending on your sales. And then down here, of course, you specify um, your open purchase order and open sales order calculations. So I want to see up to this date. Let's go and put that into the future so that makes a little bit more sense. I want to see sales orders up to this date, and I want to see open purchase orders up to the same date, so that when I run this, I will see what I need and if anything is being ordered that might satisfy that demand. So it will take both of those into calculation and give me a more accurate number of what I need. For those of you running packouts, you can include items used on packouts. For those of you using the um, par levels set up under the Inventory Item Master Miscellaneous tab, you can go ahead and include those par levels as well. So again, same exact report as what we saw in sales. So I'm not going to go ahead and run this, but essentially that is it. Of course, if you have more questions on this later on, please let us know. And we will come over to the load ID report. Load ID report is pretty much just a list of purchase orders on the load. So very, very straightforward report. I select the load ID that I want, click preview, and it will show me all of the purchase orders that are tied to that load and the line item information. Not a lot of information. It's just very straight to the point as far as what exists on this load. And then, of course, you do have options to print price and gross weight, but that's about it. It's an older report that's been there for a while. All right. Non-inventory PO list, very aptly named. It is going to show you a list of all of your non-inventory purchase orders. So, and that is including add-on PO for sales initially, and then other non-inventory POs such as those under the orders non-inventory screen. So I'm going to look up basically anything with an M number in front of it is going to be listed in here. And then this report is very important when you are closing out your months. If you do use add-on PO for sales or non-inventory purchase orders, it might tell you when you're trying to close a period that you have open purchase orders selected. Oftentimes there is a non-inventory purchase order that wasn't marked as received or wasn't taken care of. So sometimes those slip through the cracks. So this is a nice report to run when you're closing the period to make sure that you do not have any open purchase orders. So here, of course, I can select my date range. So if I was closing out the month of August, I can just go ahead and run from here, and assuming that it is the end of the month. And I can just show open POs, which is essentially what I would want to do. Or I can show both, because it might be that it was still open, but you might be backdating this, closing the period a couple of days afterwards. So you may want to see what was received and when it was actually received. Of course, I can filter by vendor if I want. I can show details. I can show not invoiced as of a certain date to filter even more. And then, of course, I can run for a specific currency if I want, if any of you are working on multi-currency. And then, of course, I can choose the order by, purely aesthetic. When I go ahead and click preview, it will show me any open purchase orders that I have. So not a lot of information. Of course, I am running summary, so I'm just seeing the purchase order and the vendor. But if I had any other ones, or if I ran detail, it would show me the line items on those as well. But that is essentially what this report is for. Again, very aptly named. And of course, you can change how you want to filter or anything like that. All right, Open PO report, also very aptly named. This is so that you can see your open purchase orders. So anything that is open between this date, what I still intend to expect to receive. So again, good for running against closing periods, or it is good if you wanted to see maybe what is coming up the next day, what you intend on receiving next day. So a lot of people will use that or use this report for that purpose. So I'm just going to backdate this again just to make sure I have something to see. This buyer ID is based on the actual purchase order. So this one is based on the buyer assigned to the PO itself. You can select either a date range or you can select a purchase order range as well. So whatever works best for you, you can go ahead and sort by that or filter by that. And of course, you have the detail in the summary report as well. So the summary will just show you strictly vendor, purchase order number, and total amounts on the purchase order itself. So here I can just see here is my date, and I'm not grouping by anything, but it is going based on the date. So each day will show me purchase orders set there, and it will show me total quantities, total costs, everything like that. And then if I show detail, it will give me the same report, but it will then give me line item information as well. And then of course I have the option to print the cost, print PO notes, anything like that. All right, moving on. PO changes log. So this is actually something we added just a couple of years ago. Very similar to the sales order log. This keeps track of any purchase order changes that were made in the system. I believe this one will actually show not only the item changes, but header changes as well. So that is one of the differences between this and the sales order side. So here, of course, I can select for a specific warehouse. I can choose what kind of date range I'm looking at, if this is based on the expected delivery date or the changes date. I can choose to show just open purchase orders or receive purchase orders. Of course, if you're showing receive purchase orders or all, maybe that doesn't mean much to you since what you received is what you received. And then show only item changes, like I said, or we can show all changes. Then here, instead of choosing all of this information, maybe I just want to look at a specific purchase order. So if I select that, I'll just enter in that purchase order number and click preview. So it'll just show me that one. But I'm going to go ahead and select date range, click preview. And so here I can see the purchase order, the item information. So here I've got my individual lines, and it shows me anything that has changed since then. So when I initially added this, I had 20, I received 18. So here it tells me I had changed it to 18, and it tells me the user and the date, and then receive date changed, so on and so forth. So it gives me basically the change that was made, a quick description of it, the user, and the date. And then, of course, anything that shows on here without this just means these were received as is, or these were never changed. So that is basically this report. Very nice, so that you can find whoever made a mistake and yell at them. Very nice. All right. So moving on. PO line details. So very straightforward again. These are nicely named reports. Again, we can choose by warehouse, we can choose specific vendors, and choose a date range. This is based on the expected receive date or the actual receive date if for actual received POs. So again, I'm going to backdate this so we have something to look at. And when I click refresh, it will show me all of my purchase orders in here. It will go ahead and highlight them based on whether they've been received or whether they are open or whether they were closed PO lines. It is showing each individual line, so you will see the PO number repeat. And certain information I can change in here if I wanted to when I'm running this report. So before I click preview, I will go ahead and select the purchase orders that I want to see. So if I want to see by load ID, I can go ahead and select that load ID, or I can go ahead and just select the individual PO. Excuse me. From there, after I've selected the PO, I will need to give it a type. So I'm going to specify, is this PO available? Is it on hold? Am I releasing it? driver check-in, backed in, unloading. So some of these are, or I should say, all of these are system specific statuses that you can specify. So when you run this report, it will run based on that type. So if I say I want to see this as available, I want to see 16 as on hold, and then I want to see 14 as available as well. It's going to group my available and my hold separately. So if I click preview, it'll show me my on hold first. So that is just that purchase order and line items. And I can put comments on there as I want. And then I go to the next and I can see both of my available purchase orders. And then if you have purchase orders linked to the same type, then you can go ahead and specify a sequence. So maybe I don't want to see number 15 or number 14 first because it does initially go by PO number. Maybe I want to go by sequence. So when I select the sequence option, I can go ahead and change this to 1 and this to 2. So now when I click preview, I can go ahead and see, oops, let me come back in here. Some reason it unchecked my purchase orders. Click preview. And now when I go back to my available, it has the 15 before the 14. So pretty straightforward, not too bad. And of course, it'll give you your status and everything like that in the actual report. From here, I can also go ahead and click print receiving cards for selected POs. It does follow the same rules in order to generate those receiving cards. It does have to have a PO, or the PO number must be selected to print, and it must have a type. The sequence does not affect the receiving card. Just bear that in mind. And of course, as you can see, no matter what you do, it will group by the type when you do the actual report. So the sequence will not affect anything between two different types. No matter what, the on hold will print first. All right. So that's basically it. Pretty straightforward report, just showing you your PO line details and everything like that. And click exit, and we will move on to the next, which is PO lines, no add-on type applied. So this is an interesting report. Essentially, it's just showing you any purchase order line that did not have an add-on PO tied to it. So the first thing you are going to do is select the add-on type that you want to look for. You can choose what type of purchase order you are looking for, and then put in your receive date. And then go ahead and click preview. And essentially, this is just showing you PO line items that were not linked to freight or did not have a freight add-on tied to it. So that is pretty much all this is. It is that. I don't think I can explain it any better than it's already explaining itself. So yeah, that's essentially if you wanted to see any items maybe you meant to tie an add-on to but forgot to. So that's just a quick check as to, okay, wait, did I actually apply this or not? All right. Print POs, it's just a reprint option for purchase orders. And here you can select inventory POs to reprint, add-on POs to reprint, non-inventory POs to reprint. Um, you can choose, once you've selected your PO option, you can choose between those purchase orders what we're looking at. And then, of course, same options as the normal print purchase order option from the PO screen itself. Whether you want to print the cost of the items, whether you want to print only print open line items, if you want to print associated add-ons, printing the receiver notes, everything like that. And then, of course, you can specify a date range if you are leaving this as all. We can filter by the warehouse and by the scheduled delivery date as well. But that is essentially it. It's just allowing you to print or preview or email out a purchase order that you may have already sent. And of course, there is my That's my particular printer. All right. PO profitability report. I believe we did see this in sales as well, but just a quick rehash since we also went through the inventory reorder list as well. It is just a quick look at any purchase order, whether it's been received or not. I can go ahead and look at that purchase order, and I can see any add-ons that were tied to it. I will see all the line items assigned. Uh, sorry, all the line items assigned to that purchase order, and I can see any sales information over here. So if you are working with an open PO, you might not see your sales information unless you allocate to open purchase orders. But that is essentially it. And then, of course, in here you can drill down on your sales to see the individual sales orders that it was tied to. But that's pretty much it. It's just showing you your purchase order, your items, and the profitability for those items based on actual sales. So it's not based on anything uh, expected or anything like that. It's not a forecast. It is for what has actually been sold. And then, of course, from here, you can print the report, which looks exactly like the screen. And then the lot analysis report just brings you directly to the lot analysis with that lot selected. And you can print for multiple POs at a time. I had just selected one purchase order to look at. All right. Purchase history report is going to show you purchase history for the item. So it's similar to the purchase history that we looked at in the purchases menu, but slightly different layout, but the same information. It is only looking at received purchase orders. So you'll see, you'll put in your date range, choose your warehouse, choose your vendor. So very similar filter options. Uh, if you want to look at a specific inventory item or type or group, you can select a specific item to look at. And then summary is just going to show you the item and the total quantity that was received within that date range. So if I go ahead and click here, I am grouping by vendor right here. So if I wanted to uncheck that, this will just show me my items, my quantity ordered, my quantity received, and if there were any differences between the two. So if I did order 55 but only receive 53, it will give me those differences as well. And then of course it will give me the cost and the average cost. So that is just a summary of the items themselves. But then if I wanted to see detail of the purchases of the actual purchase orders within that date range that I am specifying, I can go ahead and do that as well. So when I click detail, again, it's ordering by the item code, but here I can see the individual purchase order numbers, quantity received on that purchase order, and all that same information. So we'll go ahead and click exit. All right. Receiver labels and reprint receiver labels are reprint options for labels if you are printing them from Edible. So if you are printing case labels or pallet labels, this is where you can go ahead and reprint those. The only difference between receiver labels and reprint receiver labels is receiver labels only gives you the option to print what was actually received on the purchase order. So it doesn't give you the ability to overwrite the number of labels being printed or anything like that. It's simply a reprint for anything that you have quantity for, and it will reprint for that. The reprint receiver labels gives you the option to actually overwrite what you are printing. So here, if I go ahead and put in this date range that I want, and I can even select a specific purchase order. Of course, I can filter by warehouse, but I'll click refresh. And here I can go ahead and specify what I want to print for. So here I can go ahead and see, okay, this is the item that I want. I received 10 cases on this original purchase order, so it does populate with 10 labels to be printed. However, I can go ahead and overwrite that to say I only want to print one. So it was just one label that didn't print out correctly, or maybe it just got torn or wet and I just want to go ahead and replace it. So that's essentially what this is for. It just allows you to print labels in order to replace some that might have not printed correctly or got damaged. So the same thing with pallet labels. If I go ahead and select the item that I received pallets for, again, it shows me my pallets that were received. So I can go ahead and overwrite the number of pallet labels to reprint as well. So if I just print one, I will go ahead and just put in one. And then this option is telling you whether or not you want to print the partial pallet. So uh, if you received multiple pallets and it was the last pallet that had did not have the full quantity on as the other pallets did, maybe you received 13 cases and you had 5 cases on each pallet, indicating that you want to print the partial pallet will print off the last pallet with the 3 instead of one of the 5s. But that is essentially what this screen does. It allows you to overwrite and reprint as needed. So just to show you the normal receiver label screen, as you can see, you can select your purchase order, but once you select your purchase order, you select what label type that you want to print for. But as you can see, there's no option as to overwrite the quantity or anything like that. It's simply going to reprint for that item. All right. So moving down, receiver PO item list. So this one is, again, very similar to that common denominator as well as the receiver report, but it's pretty straight as far as what it shows. It doesn't show a lot of information. Um, you can look up by PO or look up by load ID, and if you're looking up by load ID, you do have 2 layouts that you can work with. Um, but if I select a specific purchase order, I'm just going to choose a random one and click preview. This is pretty much all it shows. Shows you your line number, your item, um, description and brand, pack size, country of origin, quantity, unit of measure. So that is pretty much it. It's a very, very straightforward report. Now, the receiver report shows you a lot of the same information, but it's more closely related to the layout of the open PO report. It's going to show you, it's going to give you the ability to just see the purchase order information if you want to, or if you want to see the line item information as well. So, of course, you have that detail in your summary. So, if you're running summary, you can see some of your options got taken away, like selecting specific inventory items to look at. So if I'm just looking at summary, it's just going to show me purchase orders that were received within this date range. And you can even use date and time as well if you set up date and time for your receiving. You can order by the purchase order by the vendor. You can select specific vendors or PO buyers. So again, buyers related to the purchase order, not necessarily the item. And then, of course, you can specify whether you want a page break in between purchase order or vendor. But essentially, this is what the screen looks like. It would be good if I set the correct date range. That should be good. There we go. So again, just showing you purchase order information, total quantity received on it, total amount, vendor, and all that good stuff. And then, of course, it will show you a report total at the end. So then if I wanted to, I can go ahead and select detail and see now I have the ability to select specific items. Maybe I don't want to look at a full purchase order. Maybe I just want to see what I received for this item within this date range. Now, of course, we've seen other PO reports that work well for that if you wanted to just see that, but this does give you that option. But essentially, when I run this, if I'm just running the quantity report, it's simply going to show me my purchase order, my lines, my lot number, total quantity received versus my quantity ordered. And all of this is based on, it is based on master unit of measure. Unless you're working with catch weights, then it will show you total received master UOM as well as the preferred UOM. But then if I hit quantity cost report, I have two layouts that I can look at. The first one is very much the same, shows you the PO number, the items on that purchase order, total quantity, and total cost as well. So very similar to the open PO report that we saw, or I apologize, the line item detail report. And then the other one simply sets it up just a little bit different. So here I can see my PO number and all of my items received on that purchase a little bit different way. All right. So that's basically it, and does a page break between each, or sorry, I was doing a page break because of the amount of items. Here I can see now my individual purchase orders. But that's basically it. So it's just a report showing you what you received within a specific date range that you can set up however you like. All right. And then the last report that we're looking at today is the vendor status report. So the vendor status report is very specific. It's based on the vendor, specifically priority one vendors. And you can also go by buyer. And again, this is buyers assigned to the item, not the purchase order. And of course, I can look at my items. So just like some of the other reports we've looked at, these work in tandem with each other. So if I select a priority one vendor and a buyer and an item, the item must match all of that criteria. It must be assigned to that buyer with that priority one vendor in order to show up on this report. From here, I can specify whether I want to show inactive items or not. So if I do not want to show inactive items, and then here I can say only display items that are active in the selected warehouses. So if I select multiple warehouses, it does give you a little note saying as long as the item is active in at least one of those warehouses, it will show on the report. It's not going to separate it per warehouse. And then of course I can calculate prices if I wanted to, like calculate the price level price as of a certain date, and I can choose the price level if I want to. Again, that's only if that item is within that price level. And then the open PO up to, this just calculates what open purchase orders I have. And then I can calculate average weekly sales as well. So I'll just set that there, and I'll bump this up to closer to today's date, or today's date, why not? And I'll click preview. Now it's only going to show me items, again, that have a priority one vendor assigned. So it's not going to leave out items that do not have buyers, but the item must have a priority one vendor selected. So here, River City Produce has cilantro selected, and I think cilantro is the only item. Oh, nope, I got beef. But here I can see all of the items that are linked to River City Produce, what my total quantity on hand is, that quantity on order based on the date range I select, or the up to date I selected. Here's my cost, and here are my average weekly sales. And then if I have any special costs, like on sale costs or anything like that, it would show that special cost start and end date. And that's in the vendor master file that it's pulling from. And then it'll do a page break between each vendor to show you only items assigned to that vendor. But that is basically all that is. It's just a different way of seeing your on-hand quantities, your on-order quantities, and specific cost information. All right. So that is essentially our purchases reports. So as you can see, shows a lot of the same information, but just in different ways, different layouts that you can work with. So it's there for whatever makes most sense to you. Thank you guys again for joining in. We will be sending this video out at the end of the week. Next week, I believe we are going to start talking about inventory. So until that time, have a great week, have a great weekend, and I will see you again soon. Thank you again and have a great day.